Hi, I'm disability lawyer David Brannon. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about why the Villani case is so important in CPP disability. Now, you may have heard of this case if you're dealing with a CPP case or appeal, and certainly you would if you're handling your own. This is the most famous case. It comes up all the time, and we're going to talk about why it's so important. Now, if you like this video, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us your comments down below if you have clarifications about this or any other CPP issue. Why is the Villani case so important? What's the big deal about it? So here's the thing. Up until 2001, which is when this case came down, there were two different approaches for how the courts would look at whether a disability was severe enough for someone to be approved for CPP disability. Remember that the definition of severe is in the CPP Act. If you didn't know that, that's where it is. And roughly speaking, it goes like this, that you have a disability, either mental or physical, that regularly prevents you from doing any substantially gainful employment. That's essentially how it reads and it's written. Now, that has been interpreted over time, and Villani interpreted it kind of for the last big time. But before the Villani case, there were two schools of thought on what that definition meant. And so what was happening is people were going to court, and some judges were going this way, and some judges were going that way. And so it was a crapshoot on the approach that would be taken. Now, one was called a real-world approach. And there was another approach I'll just call a more restrictive approach that focused on medical, not real world, just medical. So the medical approach was argued by Service Canada, basically, because it led to more CPP denials. The medical approach basically said that, is there any conceivable job that this person can do pretty much all of the time? That's what they were asking. And it was this idea of any conceivable job, and the limitations on whether someone could do any conceivable job were medical limitations. That's the only thing they would look at in terms of, so they would look at what is this person's limitations, medical limitations, and then can we conceive of a job that they could potentially do most of the time? And if the answer is yes, then they would be denied. That led to a lot of denials and harsh results in a lot of cases. The other approach that was being taken that was accepted by some courts, but not all, was this idea of a real-world approach to the definition of disability. Up until the Villani case, some courts would take that real-world approach and some wouldn't. So with the real-world approach, the focus was on how was this disability affecting someone in the real world, in the context of a real world with real employers who would be looking at employing somebody with a disability. So in addition to medical limitations, the real-world approach also considered personal factors as contributing to the severity of a disability as defined by CPP. These personal factors are things like a person's age, their language proficiency, their work experience, their education would be the other big one. So it went beyond just looking at medical things. It was saying, look, given these medical issues and all these other personal factors, like they're in their 60s, they're already in their 60s, they have a grade 9 education. Is there really, in the real world, is any employer going to employ this person? That's kind of what Villani was saying. They wanted the court to just take a more practical approach to this and say, when you look at this person's personal situation with their disability, combined with these other personal factors, are they employable in the real world? Is there any employer that's going to employ this person? Even if there's a conceivable job they could do, would the person who was hiring for that job ever hire someone like this with their age, with their limited education, their work history, and the fact that they have medical issues and problems that are going to affect their work? If the answer is no, that it is very unlikely that a real world employer would ever hire someone with these limitations, then disability was approved. The real world approach opened up the door for many more people to be approved for CPP disability because it took a more practical approach to the definition of disability and recognized the realities of the workplace in a competitive labor market. The reason the Villani case was important is that it was decided by the Federal Court of Appeal, and that meant once the court chose that approach, it was no longer open for the lower judges and courts in Service Canada to just say, well, we want to go with this more restrictive approach that focuses only on the medical. So what would happen is if they now use that approach, it would be overturned on appeal. Because once the federal court decides on how a part of the statute is going to be interpreted, then that new interpretation is the law for everyone below. And so now it's the law that everyone has to follow Villani, and consider all these personal factors when looking at whether someone has a severe disability. A failure of a decision maker to consider these personal factors will that's a reason to appeal, and it would be overturned if you can show that they didn't consider the personal factors. And if they had, the case would the CPP disability would have been approved. That is a very easy appeal to do, and so you always want to be looking in your case, did the decision maker take into account your personal factors and this real world idea of whether you're employable. I hope this helps and help you understand why the Villani case is so important and how disability is looked at in the real world within CPP for CPP disability claims. If you have any questions, drop them down below. We'll see you back here next time.